The Democracy Forum brings you another not-to-be-missed webinar, Energy Security in a Warming World, Perspectives from the Global South. Given increasingly severe weather patterns and continuing volatility in the Middle East, climate change and energy security have become ever more urgent global concerns. This is especially true for nations in the Global South, which must balance the expansion of reliable, affordable energy access with the need to protect their communities from climate-related shocks. Can they build resilient infrastructure and create jobs without relying on volatile fuel markets or scarce critical minerals? What role could diversification play, and how might this challenge evolve? Join our live debate to share your questions on this crucial issue with our expert panel.
Welcome, I am Humphrey Hawksley. This is a Democracy Forum debate where twice a month we discuss and argue issues that are often overlooked by the mainstream media and commentariat. Energy security in a warming world, perspectives from the Global South. Here in summer sweltering Britain, the net zero drive has become a central policy issue, the warming world versus expensive household bills. But far too little in this debate gives us a view of the already hotter, the less wealthy and less developed nations, and those with less secure energy supply chains. To discover their view, we have a superb Democracy Forum panel of Lydia Powell and Shafiqul, Aparna Roy, who was to join us, unfortunately cannot make it now because of ill health of the summer heat. Our Democracy Forum chair, Barry Gardiner, who has a deep knowledge in this subject, will sum up for us at the end. But before that, I have the privilege to ask the Democracy Forum President, Lord Charles Bruce, to lay out the background and the canvas of our discussion. Lord Bruce, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the webinar, which looks at the rapidly evolving determinants of energy security and considers the political implications of climate change viewed from the countries of the Global South. I'm grateful to the Forum for arranging this event and for assembling a panel of renowned experts to discuss the topic and to debate the issues. I thank them all for accepting our invitation to participate today under the moderation of Humphrey Hawksley. Reflecting on his disappointment at the lack of progress reached by delegates at the COP30 climate change conference, which was held last November in Brazil at Belém, the chairman of the conference, André Correa de Largo, said, "People think it is more important to be right than to really fight climate change." Or as the Financial Times commented on the outcome of the conference, even though the energy transition is moving too fast for countries still betting their futures on fossil fuels, it is moving far too slowly to produce a safe climate. But the global energy order changed dramatically in February with the attack on Iran by the United States and Israel, which has resulted in severe damage to Gulf energy supplies, with the loss of 130 billion cubic meters of natural gas production and 14 million barrels a day of crude oil production, equivalent to 29% of world output, and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where Asia derives 40% of its oil. The International Energy Agency Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, described the disruption as the greatest energy security threat in history, adding, "No country is immune to this. Everybody will be touched." And in an attempt to revitalize the purpose of the UN framework on climate change, a further conference was convened in April, jointly chaired by Colombia and the Netherlands. Colombia's Environment Minister, Irene Vélez Torres, explained, "We, of course, didn't know that a war was going to break out, but we knew the challenges of a dependency on fossil fuels. This conference comes at the best possible moment." Together representing 1/3 of global fossil fuel consumption and 1/5 of global production, 57 countries gathered at Santa Marta to discuss practical strategies for transitioning away from fossil fuels and build momentum for concrete solutions to end fossil fuel grip on economies, legal frameworks, and energy systems. But as Alan Beattie, the Financial Times senior trade writer, explains, I quote, "It would be better for the world to include the efficient and predictable carbon pricing model pioneered by the European Union, at least as part of the climate change mix. But the planet should take its wins where it can get them. The best immediate hope for emissions reduction is China, ironically a vast consumer of coal that has frequently resisted binding carbon targets. Its accidental co-spirator is President Trump, an outright climate change denier. And as data shows, sales of green tech have shot up to replace demand for oil. Thus, the increase in oil prices from the Iran war has acted as the world's most unexpected carbon pricing scheme, with President Trump being China's best salesman. Well, thank you very much for choosing to watch our webinar today. And if you have any questions or queries, please pass them to the panel through the chair.
Lord Bruce, thank you very much. The Straits of Hormuz, the greatest energy security threat in history. Our first panelist is Lydia Powell, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation Center for Resources Management, whose academic research focuses exactly on energy and climate change, examining links to poverty, securing energy supplies, and when and how this can lead to conflict. She edits the ORF Energy News Monitor and is a frequent contributor to articles on energy policy pricing and regulation. So, the perspective from the Global South, Lydia Powell, what is it?
I would just start by saying that I will modify the title slightly, Energy Security in a Warming and Developing World. The reason I say this is about 84% of the global population, which is about 6.7 billion people, with incomes less than $14,000 per year, are bearing the brunt of climate change, but they have to develop as well. Their energy consumption per person is way below global averages. And so I would say that dealing with global warming, climate change, through energy transition cannot mean transition away from development. The global north, which I just mentioned, is only 16% of the population, about 1.6 billion people. They have an abundant energy system, and all they have to do is optimize their existing system, which means mainly a qualitative change. For the global south, the energy system is still being built, and they are told that they should build it differently, though nobody really knows how they should do it. They have to go through a qualitative and quantitative transformation, which is very different from what the global north has to do. I think in this context, one narrative which is somewhat misleading is that clean and green energy is cheaper than traditional energy. I think this message, in a way, holds up the energy transition, in my opinion. None of the past energy transitions were driven by cost competitiveness. The first major transition during the Industrial Revolution in UK, 1500 to 1900, UK shifted from biomass to coal and later gas and oil. It was a quantitative as well as qualitative transition. Actually, the development of technologies at the supply and demand end drove the transition, not cost competitiveness. The second significant transition from 1900s to the present was also a quantitative and qualitative energy transition, shift from coal to oil and gas, development of steam engines, internal combustion engines, electric motors drove the quantitative changes in supply and relative shares of fossil fuels. Share of oil and gas increased at the expense of coal. So it was not the scarcity of coal that led to the introduction of more expensive oil. It was the technological shifts at the demand end, with consumers wanting convenient and clean energy for car, radios, televisions, and so on, that drove the shift from refined petroleum to grid-based energy forms, that is electricity mainly and natural gas. So actually the cost to consumers was above those of alternatives. So I would stop here saying that rather than trying to spread the narrative that clean energy is cheaper, at the generation end it is cheaper, but at the system level it's more expensive, which makes the qualitative transition for the global south very difficult. And so different financing mechanisms have to be developed, and this should be taken into consideration when narratives on energy transition for a warming and developing world are promoted. Thank you.
Lydia Powell, thank you very much for that. Fascinating point. We're talking about energy security in the title. Just talk about energy insecurity. To what extent is that a big issue?
I would talk about energy insecurity at the national level and also at the household level. At the national level, energy insecurity can be handled by increasing supplies. I think traditionally in the global south, particularly in India, rationing of fuel was the mechanism that was used to cope with energy insecurity. At the household level, energy insecurity, which I interpret as lack of access to modern energy, persists. To give you an example, I think half the households in rural India still use firewood and biomass as fuel for cooking, which is a form of energy insecurity driven by economic circumstances of the household. At the national level, energy insecurity is mostly interpreted as energy that comes from outside the territory of the country. So imported energy is seen as a form of energy insecurity, and most of the policies implemented try to reduce the quantity of imported energy. So, for example, oil is substituted with other forms of energy. Electrification of transport hasn't progressed as far.
In the least developed and the very poorest countries, are we wrong to make this difference between renewable energy and fossil fuel energy? Because their thinking is simply on energy, that they need to cook and they need to get from A to B.
For them, I think the poorest household, it is any energy as long as it is affordable. So I would say that the poor, for the global south and households who cannot afford energy, energy needs to be affordable, number one. I think that's very important. I'll give you an example. During the current crisis, when the primary cooking fuel in Indian households, LPG, liquid petroleum gas, became scarce, the country rationed the supply of LPG. They diverted fuel supplies from industry to households. However, since the price increased, many households went back to using firewood and biomass. Okay. So affordability is a critical parameter.
And in the West, we don't really understand this. It's not part of our debate. Margaret Barry in the audience here has a question. Are current renewable energy supply chains just a new type of resource colonialism?
Not necessarily. I think to a certain extent, import of, though the energy itself is free, the technology to harness it is very often imported. So I wouldn't say that it's a form of colonialism, but it
is a form of
control. But it is an idea which is promoted by technocrats. I would say it's democracy doesn't decide the energy choice. Technocracy decides the choice. So that way, I would say you can call it intellectual colonialism.
And a point you raised earlier, a question in from Rimjim Sud. Could you comment on how many countries of the global south can transition to green energy when international finance systems make the cost of borrowing so high?
I think most of the countries, their energy transition is financed from domestic budgets. Even in India, about 80% of the transition is financed through domestic budgets. And I say that the countries which are determined to make the transition will not rely completely on international finance. It would be welcome, but they will not completely rely on that.
So it's not the international finance system that's holding this back or controlling or some neo-colonialism. If they wanted to do it, they could do it, but it's a matter of finding affordable energy.
I won't say if they wanted to do it, they could. It's very, most of the budgets for clean energy transition comes at the expense of development spending. You can say that development spending is a form of adaptation, but most of it comes from development spending. So I wouldn't say they can do it if they want to, but they are trying beyond their means to progress with the transition.
Thank you. That is that's intriguing. Can you stay with us? I'm going to bring in now Shafiqul Alam, who is a lead energy analyst at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. His interests center on renewable energy, energy efficiency, climate finance, and policy instruments that spearhead the clean energy transition. He's a familiar face and name on Asian and international platforms and is the recipient of the International Climate Protection Fellowship from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation in Germany. So, Shafiqul Alam, global warming and the global south, give us your argument. I think you are muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion. And chair of the session, president of the Democracy Platform, fellow panelists, and the ones who have joined online. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening as applicable. So already the fellow panelist has discussed the issues that are relevant to the global south. In fact, if we
do we have a frozen Shafiqul Alam who was about to put us on tenterhooks as to what he's going to. If we do, we'll go back briefly to Lydia until Lydia, you are with us again. Thank you so much. And I was going to say to you, Shafiqul Alam's got some technical problems. Is just because here in Britain, net zero is a big debate here, and we have deadlines and all sorts of things, and the argument is about our household bills and that. the commentariat here talks about China and India and all these big polluters. Is that how much is that an incorrect or unfair platform of the debate?
Definitely, it's an unfair characterization of the global south. I think the stock of emissions in the atmosphere, which is responsible for climate change today, I think India is responsibility is less than 3%. That is historic responsibility. Current energy consumption in India is way below a global average, and the emissions is also way below global average. It is about 1.5 tons per person. It's way below global average. I think the size of the country with 1.4 billion people who consume very little energy adds up to a big total. And I think the quantitative sum is used to portray countries in the global south, especially India, as a big polluter because its coal use is dominant in power generation. About 70 to 75% of power comes from coal. But if you look at coal use per capita, many of the Western countries consume more coal than India per person. American coal consumption per person is higher than that of India. America, in fact, generates more power from coal. If you just take the electricity generated, it's larger than that of India. So, because it consumes so much electricity. But since India's electricity pie is dominated by coal, it is portrayed as a big polluter. Of course, it is number 3, but it's because of the size of the country, not because we consume too much. We actually consume too little for decent living.
That is Peter Cornish, who's in the audience, has a question. How do we secure the resilience of energy grids against intensifying climate-driven hazards like floods and I guess heat waves and other things like that? How do you secure the grid?
India has so far been very good at handling grid imbalances. Though we have, we do have a national level grid, there are a lot of complications, weather related, climate related, and we haven't had so many collapses that one would expect in such a large country. I think one reason for this is though it is interconnected, different parts of the country can operate on different parts of the grid. So decentralized grids can cope with weather-related disturbances much better than a completely integrated grid. Any fault is isolated immediately, and the rest of the country doesn't lose power. So I feel decentralization of the grid, which is probably happening in some places because of decentralized generation, is one form of resilience. If you have village level mini grids, they will be more resilient to weather related disruptions.
And outside of China, who we know is forging ahead on renewable energy stuff, is there a global south or developing nation that is pioneering a way on a particular technology or a way forward? Or is it just China?
It is mostly China, but there are certain countries whose resource endowment allows them to be to have greener energy systems than some other countries. One example is Brazil. The high share of hydropower and the use of biofuels in transportation has given it a privilege in becoming a greener energy country. There are some other South American countries which have abundant hydropower resources, which can become green much faster than India. India, unfortunately, doesn't have such a large hydropower endowment. So
in India, sorry to interrupt, but India, unlike China, India is not pioneering new technologies into renewable energy. I think Bangladesh was beginning to. I don't know where it is on that, but because this means that China is dominating the market, it will have a monopoly.
As a producer and exporter of technology, I think China is dominant and it's far ahead of others. But India, as a consumer and user of renewable technology, I think India is doing much better than what one would expect from a country with very low incomes and very scarce resources. So India has a very ambitious target for increasing renewable energy, 500 gigawatts. I think Shafiq is online now, so he would be able to tell you more about that.
Thank you so much for giving us even more information, insight, and things to argue about. Shafiqul, thank you so much. You were about to begin. Please begin.
No, did I? I mean, when I was out, I mean, I thought I was here.
Right at the beginning, we didn't hear anything. You froze. So start again, and
okay.
We'll pick you up and push back against you. Off you go.
Okay, sorry for that. So the point is, this geopolitics-led disruption. Before this, what happened? This Ukraine-Russia crisis. The discussion was more related to energy transition to spearhead, climate change mitigation and achieve net zero emission. However, following this Ukraine-Russia crisis, followed by Middle East crisis, the discussion is taking shape towards energy security. Of course, this energy security thing was there already prior to this disruption, but it is taking the center stage now. Why it is? This is because a country like Bangladesh, which relies on imports for more than 62% of its primary energy. Because of this Middle East crisis, the LNG cost has significantly increased. So, for example, Bangladesh had to spend additional $1 billion just to secure 3 months LNG, and which is only 1/3 of its total annual gas consumption. So if we consider that, energy security is now ever important. And considering this, the Bangladesh government has drafted new renewable energy strategy document with enhanced ambition. It has set a target of increasing renewable energy share of renewable energy to 20% in its overall generation by 2030, compared to 2%, the current share of 2%. So it will require significant efforts, but we see that it makes sense to enhance this renewable energy capacity. At the same time, a government has offered incentives for renewable energy, particularly the distributed ones like rooftop solar, to scale this up quickly. Besides, the government has offered incentives for electric vehicles, charging stations to rapidly electrify the transport system. This also makes sense given that Bangladesh significantly relies on imported oils, that particularly the crude oils that is heavily for that Bangladesh heavily relies on the Middle East countries. On the other hand, it relies on Singapore, Indonesia, and other countries for diesel. Because of Ukraine-Russia crisis, the Brent crude price significantly increased. After a brief spell of average price of $73, $70 to $73 per barrel, it again increased to $84, $85. That means other products, refined products will be expensive. However, one thing is more important to consider, that diesel is significantly has become significantly expensive, because the diesel market does not follow the price trend of Brent crude. Market is very tight. It has limited flexibility. And because of that, Bangladesh had to pay significant subsidy during March, April, and May. And as a result, the government had to increase price of different fuels. At the same time, it had to increase electricity tariff in June. Because of this electricity tariff adjustment, I see that the clean energy, particularly distributed systems like rooftop solar, is financially more compelling now for industries. Similarly, it is financially compelling for households with higher energy consumption. Similarly, this higher tariff will induce the adoption of energy efficient technologies, both in industries and households. I see that there is a compelling financial case for them. So, highly import dependent Bangladesh now is considering significant transition towards renewable energy. At the same time, this higher tariff will induce the adoption of renewable energy and also energy efficiency and electrification because of incentive. At the same time, Bangladesh will require significant international support for technology transfer and also financing of its energy transition. And given that Bangladesh relies on imports for clean energy technologies, so international support will certainly be pivotal in this regard. And if we consider the current state of financing, international financing or the foreign financing in this energy transition space, I would say MDB's financing is playing an important role in some of the projects. On the other hand, private sector is playing a critical role in particularly these utility scale renewable energy projects and also the rooftop solar projects in industries. Besides, the government is also contributing to this transition. However, since the government has significantly enhanced its ambition to make this to translate this ambition into reality, we will certainly need international financing support. At the same time, if we consider the South Asia region as a whole, so I would see that there is significant potential for regional cooperation. Bangladesh, India, Bhutan, Nepal. Already bilateral cooperation exists between different countries. For example, Bangladesh, India, Bhutan, India, Nepal, and also other cooperation between Bangladesh and Nepal via India. So this already exists. And there is also further potential to enhance this cooperation. If we can enhance in the foreseeable future, and then the South Asia region can in fact accelerate the energy transition further at a faster scale, at a faster rate and scale, and it can also significantly shield the region from this global supply disruption and price volatility. So what I see, I would end with a comment that we need to co-create this energy transition. And also, one thing we need to remember, as the saying goes, the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. Rather, we transitioned to better solutions. Similarly, clean energy and energy efficiency offer the same opportunities for us. So we need to spearhead that. But we also need to consider the capacity and the ground realities of countries like Bangladesh, because any supply disruption in the international market immediately affect these countries because of this Middle East crisis, the LPG scarcity, and the high price of LPG significantly affected poor households. And as my fellow panelists mentioned, in India, some people had to switch to the traditional mode of biomass. So in Bangladesh also, same thing happened. So we need to make a case or we need to make the transition in a way that benefits all citizens of the country, like in Bangladesh. I'll stop there.
I think that's very. I mean, but Bangladesh is one of the countries that's cited often on the climate change threat. So, in the national consciousness, for want of a better phrase, is it affordable energy, like Lydia says? Is it we must go to renewables because that's the best thing to do, and that might stop the encroaching sea? What is the drive of energy security there?
For Bangladesh, renewable energy, I would say it's a cheap source, but it also has different perspectives. For example, industries that rely on grid power, so it's expensive for them. They have significant incentive to install rooftop solar, and with the latest round of power tariff adjustment, now they can also consider rooftop solar with battery storage for them. So
but even if Bangladesh manages to sort of get their own emissions right down, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference, is it, to the actual climate change thing? It's too small for that.
Right. Yeah, that's what at the beginning I said. This for Bangladesh, the more rational is energy security. It's not the climate change mitigation. However, this mitigation initiative will eventually provide financial benefits to the people as well. For example, industries can save money because these export-oriented industries, they also need to remain competitive in the international market. For example, the apparel sector, not only they need to reduce cost, but also because of the ESG requirements of different buyers in the international market.
I want to bring Lydia back in now for both of you to answer a couple of questions. But basically, Shafiqul, do you agree with Lydia's viewpoint? We're looking at the view from the global south perspective, that affordable energy is the most important criteria, and that the whole renewables, solar farms, wind farms, gas, coal, whatever, that becomes irrelevant against that criteria. You agree with that?
Yes, affordable energy is the prime concept, certainly. However, there are also other conditions. For example, the fossil fuel-based system in Bangladesh, in many cases, is highly subsidized. We also need to factor in that in this discussion, because Bangladesh's power system is highly subsidized, and despite this tariff adjustment this year, government will still have to pay more than $3 billion as subsidy to the power sector.
Okay.
And this is not only the standalone case, because the government increased tariffs 4 times in 2023 and 2024, total 4 times. Even then, government had to pay more than $4 billion in the fiscal year of 2025 as subsidy to the power sector.
Lydia, do you agree with the thrust of your fellow panelists' argument?
It is true that we subsidize energy provision to poor households and to farmers. That's the case in India too. Some of the states, that is the regional governments, give away electricity free to farmers, and electricity is highly subsidized to households that consume very few units of electricity. That's common across the country. And the government has tried to promote rooftop solar as an option. For the government, the incentive is that it can stop paying out subsidies. There's only a one-time cost of installing the solar systems. So the government offers a certain amount as a grant free, and then the rest of the amount the household has to borrow. So the success adoption rate of the rooftop solar scheme for households has been less than what would one desire. I think the complexity in navigating bank loans makes it very difficult for the household to adopt a decentralized system where his transaction cost, his or her transaction cost in terms of mobilizing the loan, arranging for repairs, installation.
It gets back
too
to
much time.
it gets back to the economics of it all. But
Yeah.
question for both of you: in Asia, or let's say in South Asia, which country is the furthest ahead in moving towards renewables? Shafiqul?
I think perhaps Sri Lanka.
Sorry, Lydia, what was that?
Yeah.
I would say perhaps Sri Lanka. If you just look at the composition of the energy market, maybe it's Sri Lanka because it's got more hydropower.
Okay.
they have
So,
hydropower.
Shafiqul, you agree with that?
I mean, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, almost similar share, I would say. Almost similar share. So what happened, if I say, in India, it's a case of persistent efforts, right? In the last decade and a half, persistent efforts from the government and the private sector and different stakeholders. In Pakistan, what happened, that's what I was trying to argue in my discussion, that more of a security concern. So after the Ukraine-Russia crisis, Pakistan increased the tariff of their electricity perhaps 17, 18 times because of high subsidy burden and high import bills. The government was unable to import fossil fuels. So what the people did, they ultimately installed rooftop solar. So in the last 2 to 3 years, there is a massive boom, a record boom of rooftop solar in Pakistan. So that has increased the share of renewable energy in their overall electricity system. On the other hand, Sri Lanka's system, the demand is less, and also, they have hydro. Altogether, these three countries has almost similar share.
Okay. A question I'm going to give one to one of you, one to the other, but pitch in if you want, from Anand Tomar. How do we prevent green energy projects from displacing indigenous communities? Lydia?
I think this is a big challenge in India and probably in other parts of South Asia because green energy the land requirement is quite high. And in a country where land is scarce and most of the land is used for food production, there is a competition for land, for energy generation, and for food production. For indigenous communities, I think one option which is being tried in India is to have farmers install solar panels in their agricultural land and become energy entrepreneurs. They start selling energy to the grid. So they mobilize solar energy, and if the solar panels do not interfere with the agricultural practices like irrigation and so on. In fact, solar panels can also contribute towards irrigation. I think this is a model which can prevent green energy from displacing local communities.
Shafiqul, do you agree with that?
Yeah, of course. This is one of the ways, certainly, because Bangladesh is also a land-scarce country and heavily dependent on agriculture. But another option is also government can earmark land where these projects can be implemented, particularly the land that is owned by the government. So that can be earmarked, and then there can also be project can be implemented. And of course, government can significantly encourage this distributed system like rooftop solar.
Okay, and one last question to both of you. Lydia, you go first, from Ritish S. Nigam. What lessons can be learned from countries that have successfully improved energy resilience in the face of environmental stress? What lessons?
Actually, the country that comes to mind immediately is China, because almost all the media outlets and even academic literature is talking about how China managed the energy security crisis so well. But the lessons are there, but it's very hard to replicate. For example, China's industrial policy drove its environmental policy. It became a massive producer of renewable technologies, and so there was demand for renewable technologies from the surplus production. And for India to replicate that strategy, China also used other strategies like converting coal into liquid and displacing imported oil. All these are very difficult for a country like India to replicate.
I was going to say, China, of course, has made great success, but it's an autocracy, isn't it? So it can do. Shafiqul, do you agree with Lydia that China has forged the way under its autocratic rule?
No, that is, I mean, okay. But what I feel, the transition lesson, I think it is country specific. It has its own circumstances, and the country can choose to follow its own path. For example, the Vietnam's transition. So it had its own way, like during the pandemic in 2020 and 2021. So how did it happen? Because of that feed-in tariff. So it triggered that transition. In Pakistan, what happened? There's crisis. This crisis triggered the transition. So I think this can be an example. Bangladesh is now trying to spearhead.
And I'm bringing in Barry Gardiner now, but so Pakistan and China are the two key examples of the topic of our debate. I'd like now to bring in the chair of Democracy Forum, Barry Gardiner, whose screen is blank, so I'm not sure if Barry is with us.
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can, Barry. Just to say that for our audience, Barry, you are steeped in this topic, I think, aren't you? So,
steeped is a yes, probably the right word. I'm trying to become visual, but it doesn't seem to be happening very much. I'll try once more. No, I don't think so. Perhaps I just use my voice in that case, Humphrey.
Use your voice, yes.
Look, where do I start here? Let's start where we were ending up with China. China is actually a very good example of the last question, because China is now structurally reducing its emissions. It's believed, it's not absolutely clear, but it's believed that China's emissions probably peaked in 2025. Now that's quite some feat, even though overall one would still consider its NDCs are not on track to achieve the 1.5 as the world has stipulated. Let's maybe start though with two things. One is to say that if you look at the climate change in and of itself as an energy security problem, then you're looking at it only with one eye. You have to look at climate change as both an energy issue and also as an ecological biodiversity issue. And that's where I thought some of the comments that were made about land use and land use change didn't quite hit the mark. I think it's really important to understand that, yes, of course, traditionally, people gather firewood, they cut down forests in order to get cheap cooking oil, get cheap cooking fuel. But there are two forms of affordability here. And you can either pay to transition to a cleaner, greener, more energy efficient and more energy secure world, or you can pay more not to transition. And this is what Mark Carney, who of course is now the Prime Minister in Canada, and who was the Governor of Bank of England prior to that, but who led the global financial world in the Task Force for Climate-related Financial Disclosures, used to call the tragedy of the horizon. We're keen to see a return that is quick, but don't realize that actually the cost of what we're doing is incredibly expensive in the long run. The other thing that I would start talking about is the temperature. If you look at the most recent assessment, it would indicate that current policies, that's current global policies, are the equivalent of roughly a 2.6 degree of warming above the historic base. And that's even if every government met its official pledges, its net zero targets, we would still be heading for 2.2 degrees. So well above the 1.5 that the world agreed in Paris. And of course, this is not just a theoretical level that we're aiming for here. The reason that we're looking at that as the significant level is that if you exceed that, then you are putting, because of the heat load, you're putting more stress on your power grids, you're looking at more drought, you're hitting hydropower, you're looking at more storms tearing down transmission lines. Precisely the infrastructure that energy security depends on will become increasingly degraded and destroyed. So the IPCC, really, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has recognized that those impacts and energy insecurity are not separate crises. They actually are totally interconnected. Now, I thought that our panelists made important points about the inequality of energy and the way in which we have a situation where 650 to 700, maybe 750 million people worldwide still have no access to electricity at all. 2 billion still cook over open fires or charcoal, and about 8 out of 10 of those are without power who live in sub-Saharan Africa. So whilst the panelists focused on their own areas of background, I think we have to see that the real call from the global south here it is hugely coming from sub-Saharan Africa. You've got a region where renewable generating capacity per person is a fraction of what it is in the global north. Barely 30 watts per person against well over 1,000 watts per person in high-income economies. So when we talk about energy security in the developing world, we're not talking about diversifying an existing supply. We're talking about building a system from the ground up and choosing now what that system ought to be. And here, again, I thought we touched on in the panelists' discussion of the importance of mini-grids. And I thought it was really important that we got to that, because actually huge transmission systems across countries are incredibly expensive to build, but they're also wasteful. You have losses in the transmission, of course, and they demand a centralized structure which cannot always be implemented by developing countries. Whereas if you have mini-grids, localized communities generating, using, and trading amongst themselves their own electricity production, that is actually a much more secure way of doing it. And it's about solar power with battery storage. And that, I think, really is a way in which development can happen much, much faster. There was talk about the affordability of LPG in particular. And our panelists said, well, when that became scarce, they diverted it from business, but people went back to what they saw as the cheapest of all, and that was garnering firewood and charcoal. But then you are part of that ecological trade-off, and you are, by reducing those forests, you are making the impacts of climate change even worse. Humphrey, assure me that you can still hear me, because of course all I can see is a blank screen with my name on it. Am I still transmitting through to you at all?
I would like to bring back the
maybe
panel.
I'm not.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? It seems that Barry cannot hear us. Lydia?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can.
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Barry, you hearing Lydia?
Yes, I heard Lydia. But can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. But
Okay.
I want to know if Lydia and Shafiqul want to push back against anything you've been saying.
Oh, I do hope so.
Lydia, is Barry completely right, or can you pick him up on some points?
See, I think for the very poor, the idea of a future is something very complex. I think they live in very short time horizons. See, I agree with what he said. When they start using biomass and so on, they do compromise biodiversity, where you can, and I would differentiate between climate change and local environmental security there in terms of land use. But for the very poor, I think time horizons are very short. I've interacted with a lot of people from very economically challenged backgrounds in India. You come across them every day in your day-to-day life. And if you ask them what matters to you, the long term doesn't matter to them at all, because they don't seem to have a future. They don't think they have a future. They only want the present.
So for them, it's this idea of affordable energy.
Yes, today.
Not the
But
vision.
that is absolutely the role of government. It is the role of government to think long term, or at least not short term, but medium to long term, and to provide the solutions that are going to enable not just this generation to survive, but future generations to thrive. And unfortunately, there is no political will in many countries to do that. And Lydia, you talked about India. You said India is doing well. Look, I'm sorry. There has been progress that India has made on renewable capacity installation. That is certainly true. Certainly in 2024, it was the cumulative capacity was fourth in the world. But India has reached a turning point now, I think, in its power sector, and non-fossil fuel supplies the majority of new electricity generation in that year, 24-25, for the first
Barry,
time. But its reliance on coal power continues to drag on its ambition.
Barry, can I just jump in there, because we are out of time? I wanted to get back to Shafiqul to ask him, is Barry Gardiner giving us a global north perspective or a global south perspective?
No, it's mixed. I think mixed. One thing I would like to add there on what Lydia mentioned about the short term and long term. For example, the LPG issue, if we consider in Bangladesh, right? The electric cooking is cheaper compared to LPG. But it would be, if so many people all on a sudden transition to or switch to the electric cook stove, then there will be significant pressure on the grid. So the thing is, the government also need to consider this, because given if electricity supply is ensured, uninterrupted electricity supply, people will switch to electric cook stove, and that will be less, emitting as well.
But Shafiqul, you will know that there are the clean cooking pots. They use solar. They are self-contained, and families are able to use those, and it saves the women trekking miles to find the firewood, and chopping the trees down and carrying it back. And you know how far and how much of a woman's day, her productive capacity, is used up simply in gathering fuel in so many countries. And yet we have a technology that enables them to capture the solar power and do that cooking for them.
No, I agree.
We are out of time for a moment. I think we've had a last one, very good. And I just want to go back to Lydia Powell. Just give us one line on the perspective for the global South, energy security in a warming world. Just one quick line.
I think energy security should be thought of from both the national and household level, so that every person in the world has enough secure energy without compromising environmental security to have a decent life.
National and household level. Shafiqul Alam, your final word, quickly.
I would end with the hope that, with energy transition, with a properly designed energy transition pathway, achieving energy security is possible, and that can lead to, energy affordability and also ensure uninterrupted supply.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lydia Powell, Shafiqul Alam, and Barry Gardiner. That was a great final debate that we had there. I wish we had more time. But thank you all at the Democracy Forum for making this really important debate happen. Our next Democracy Forum debate is July 28th. The US under Trump, a new global security paradigm. What a topic. Please join us. But until then, from all of us at the Democracy Forum, stay safe and goodbye.
The Democracy Forum is a not-for-profit organization founded in 2009 under the patronage of Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne. Its principal goal was to work for the furtherance of democracy, peace and the rule of law in order to counter religious fundamentalism and intolerance in our global communities. In an increasingly fractured world, this goal continues to be the driving force behind all of the Forum's activities. Lord Charles Bruce is the current president of the Forum. Since its inception, the Forum has hosted and co-hosted seminars on a wide variety of topics relating to democracy and human rights across the world. The Democracy Forum encourages academics, students, journalists and other socially and politically conscious people to attend our seminars and to participate in the question and answer session. Details are available on our website, thedemocracyforumlimited.com.